Good, beautiful morning to you. If the camera's a little wobbly, it's because it's a little windy here. Just bear with that. So if you're unfamiliar, I've been reading straight from the life and teachings of the Masters of the Far East by Baird Spalding. This book series was written at the turn of the century, and the adventures recorded within were undertaken just before the turn of the 20th century, so around the 1900 time frame. It's a beautiful 6-part series, very spiritual, very enlightened, very detailed, just awesome information passed from sages and seers, Christ beings, to mankind. You need not look anywhere other than within yourself for answers and information, and included within that search, you will definitely come upon beautiful books such as this, where the information can just be downloaded. You can just feed yourself wonderful information. So I encourage each and every single one of you to take steps to empower yourself. If you don't already know that, I am a promoter of consciousness, being conscious of current events, and not current events that are portrayed by the popular mass media, which is corporately sponsored, which basically just feeds the public misinformation that's going to generate the most ad revenue and benefits for corporate individuals. Secondly, and probably most importantly, I promote Christ consciousness, or cosmic consciousness, enlightenment, nirvana, however you want to refer to it. I promote being 100%, what's the best way to say this, 100% in contact with the quantum field, with however you want to refer to it, God, spirit, love, source, energy, chi, prana, any of those words that you want to use. I promote being 100% in contact with that, and it is possible. So without further ado, I'm going to read from chapter 4, Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. It's a very short chapter, so let's get rolling. As the next stage of our journey was to begin in the nature of a side trip, we left the main part of our outfit and the next morning proceeded on our way to a small village about 20 miles distance, with only Jast accompanying us. The trail was not of the best, and at times was very difficult to follow, as it wound through the dense forests peculiar to that country. We arrived at our destination just before sunset that evening, tired and hungry, as we had pushed on all day with only a short noonday halt for lunch. The country in general was rough and uneven, and the trail seemed practically unused. It was necessary to cut our way through occasional thickets of trailing vines. At each delay, Jast seemed impatient. We wondered at this, for he had previously seemed so poised. This was the first and only time during the 3.5 years he was with us that he was not the same cool, collected Jast that started with us. Later, we did not wonder at his unrest in the light of what transpired. We entered the little village of about 200 inhabitants, 1/2 hour before sunset, and when it was known that Jast was with us, I believe every villager, old and young, and every pet and domestic animal came to greet us. While we were the object of more or less curiosity, it was immediately noted that Jast was the center of interest, greeted by all with the utmost reverence. After a few moments, he said a word to the villagers, and all but a few returned to their usual duties. Jast turned to us and asked if we wished to go with him while the camp was being prepared for the night. 5 of our party said that they were tired after the day's journey and wished to rest. The remainder of us followed Jast and the handful of villagers towards the far side of a clearing that surrounded the village. After crossing the clearing, we had gone but a short distance into the jungle when we came upon the form of a man lying upon the ground as though dead. This was our impression at first glance. A second glance, however, showed that the repose suggested calm sleep rather than death. We stood staring as though transfixed, for we saw that the figure lying on the ground was the very man who had accompanied us along the trail. It was Jost. Suddenly, as Jost walked toward it, the figure became animate and rose to a standing position. As the figure and Jost stood face to face for an instant, there was no mistaking the identity. It was Jost. All saw that it was he. Then, instantly, the Jost we had known had disappeared, and there was but one figure standing before us. Of course, all this was accomplished in much less time than it takes to tell, and the wonder was not one of us, and the wonder was that not one of us questioned it. The 5 who had been left behind at camp came running without a signal from any of us. We afterward asked them why they came. The answers were, "We don't know. The first we knew, we were all on our feet and running to you. We simply do not know why we did it. None of us recall any signal. We found ourselves running in your direction before any of us realized what we were doing." One of our number remarked, "My eyes are opened so wide that I see far beyond the veil of death, and the wonders that stand revealed are beyond conception." Another said, "I see the whole world be overcoming death. How vividly the words come back. The last enemy, death, shall be overcome." Is not this the fulfillment of these words? What pygmies are our mere intellects in comparison with this gigantic but simple understanding, and yet we have dared to look upon ourselves as giants of intellect? Why, we are mere babes. I just begin to see the meaning of "ye must be born again." How true the words. I leave the reader to imagine our surprise or bewilderment. Here was a man with whom we had been in daily contact, and by whom we had been served daily, that was able to lay his body down for the protection of others and go on and serve so very efficiently. Could it do otherwise than recall, "He that is greatest among you shall be servant or shall serve"? I think there was not one among us, but from that moment lost all fear of death. These people are accustomed to laying a body down before a village in the jungle of a country infested with marauding men and animals, and that village is as safe from the ravages of men and animals as though it were in a civilized country. It was very evident that Jast's body had been lying where we found it for a considerable time. The hair had grown long and bushy, and in it were the nests of little birds peculiar to that country. These birds had built their nests, reared their young, and the young had flown away, thus giving unmistakable evidence of the time the body had been in that position and inactive. These birds are very timid, and will abandon their nests at the slightest disturbance. This shows the great love and trust of the little birds. The excitement was so great that no one in our camp except Jast slept that night. He slept like a child. At intervals, one or another of our party would sit up and look over toward where Jast was sleeping, then lie down again, saying, "Pinch me to see if I am really awake." Occasionally, a more forceful expression was used. That's the end of that chapter. And there was quite a bit in that chapter that, if you had never endeavored to explore this arena of human consciousness and human potential, or may I better say the potential of the Holy Spirit, the whole I Spirit, as we had talked about in the last chapter, then what is contained within that chapter 4 would more than likely seem very implausible, almost very unrealistic. And I endeavor, and if I may be so bold, I would ask you to question what it is that presents itself to you as your daily reality. We say that something is unrealistic because it doesn't conform to the repetitious pattern of what we experience on a daily basis. Whereas we don't think it's very realistic what the concept of flight, although we know that it exists, we know that we can get inside of an airplane, and we know that we can experience it, and we do experience it. However, for a bird, the concept of flight, or even the reality, and all of the things experienced while flying are extremely real. Therefore, again, if I may be so bold, I would ask that you just question what it is that is real. And I would then go on to ask you, if this resonates with you, to investigate what science calls the quantum field. And then ask, is the quantum field real? Is the quantum field real to you? Is it real to quote-unquote others, your brothers and sisters? And if it is, and if you come upon the conclusion of your own accord that this is a tangible and viable reality with which one may come into conscious contact with, well, then I endeavor you to begin a dialogue, or to begin a conscious interaction with that reality which we call the quantum field.